So let me just try speaking and see if my my mic is working a little bit more consistently. So everybody, if this sounds good and the audio is clear, then I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and I'll do just go over the introduction that Jessica has already started us. Okay, I think we can go ahead. So I want to say that this series is brought to us by Community-Based Research Canada, and particularly the Jessica, who you've seen, has been working with me and working with us over the summer to bring you this series. It's a series on why community-based research is important for societal change, and today is a session on what the relationship is between community-based research and the UN SDGs. There's a picture of me. I'll tell you more about me in a second. Community-based research Canada is a global, is a national body to bring together people working in both universities and communities in the field of community-based research. It's been going since 2008, and we have newsletters, we have webinars, we produce every couple of years a CUXO, Community University Exposition, which is the largest gathering of researchers and community researchers and academic researchers in the country. And we look forward to any and all of you participating in that. And of course, if you're interested in our newsletter or other things, that would welcome that as well. We want to hear from you, as it says on this slide, and we've got so during this session, we'll be when I finish my presentation, you'll be able to make comments or ask questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, so everybody can see that chat box. I'll just write a thing here. It says, "This is the chat box." There you go. There, so you can see that's where the chat box. So we welcome all of you. So far there's 14 of you on the thing, and as I gather, you're from many different parts of the world. So welcome, and let's get started. So I've titled this this talk "Beyond the Ivory Tower," and the ivory tower being the metaphor for for an encircled a university that's surrounded by a moat and is impenetrable by society around it. That's a bit provocative, I suppose. But I want to talk about knowledge community and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Who am I? Well, I'm first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanich speaking peoples who have lived for up to 14,000 years on this this part of what we call now is the quite colonial name, as you can see, Queen Victoria. And I'm a community development and adult education person by background. I've been involved in community-based or participatory research for since the early 1970s, and I work together with my colleague, and you'll see his face shortly, Rajesh Tandon, in this UNESCO Chair in community-based research. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what the UN SDGs are. Most of you will know about that, but just for a little review, I want to talk a little bit about the principles of community-based research and then the contribution of community-based research to achieving the SDGs. You can see I have a little bit less hand in. but still basically the same guy. And that's Dr. Rajesh Tandon, who's the founder of Participatory Research in Asia, a very distinguished, global, national and global research center that does capacity building with grassroots, India and Asia. So why the SDGs? Why is everybody, seems to be a lot of attention being given to the SDGs? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, it's the most progressive global agenda. We live in a world which I don't have to tell you is troubled. It's troubled by authoritarianism. It's troubled by rates of inequality. It's troubled by persistent, violence against women, oppression of indigenous and other marginalized peoples around the world. But in spite of that, the United Nations system and the people associated with it managed to come up with a set of really quite transformative goals. But something that's interesting about these goals is that they unlike the Millennium Development Goals that we heard about before, which were really targeting the global South, this is a global agenda. So I want to just go quickly through these. I'm not going to go into any detail, but just to remind us what the 17 goals are. And you can find all that at in the Sustainable Development website, of the UN. There's a lot of material on this on this. So what's different about these one? Well, as I said, these are universal. They're universal goals. They're not just for the global South. For Canada has a secretary, just as South Africa does, just as Ghana or Laos. Everybody has an interest and an involvement in this. So these are universal goals. They are integrative goals. So these goals aren't sectoral, aren't isolated by sector. Obviously, the ones on gender justice relate to ones on poverty. Poverty relates to ones on working together on partnerships. And so these goals are seen to be as integrative and intersectoral or interdisciplinary, and that's different than the earlier goals were. The third thing, which is different, is that these goals, and if you read the mission statement of the SDGs, it's a very progressive agenda, and they actually talk about transformation. And I think all of us would agree that in the times that we're facing right now, that a transformation is very much needed. So what are the 17 SDGs? Just to remind us, I'm just going to go quickly through these. So the first one is to end poverty in all of its forms everywhere. And as I said, there are, if you log into the UN sites, you'll see that each of these goals, there are a number of targets, sub-targets that refer to each one. So in all, there are 169 sub-targets for the 17 goals. So ending poverty is the first one. Ending hunger and achieving food security and improved nutrition is the second one. In health, basically, ensuring healthy lives and the promotion of well-being for all at all ages of life. Ensuring, number 4 is education, inclusive and quality education, and the promotion of learning throughout one's life. Fifth one is gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Sixth one is water usage and also sanitation for everybody. The seventh one is affordable, reliable, sustainable modern energy for all. That's, number 8 is inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. This is about livelihoods. It's about the notion of inclusive of economy, not just a let's let the rich get richer type of scenario. 9 is infrastructure, resilient infrastructure to promote sustainable industrialization. 10 is to reduce inequality within and among countries. We're all too familiar with the statistics. Oxfam's done a great job of drawing that information together in quite a dramatic way. In that, and even in Canada, we know that very few number of people actually have most of the wealth in our country, in all countries, and inequality between countries is, of course, growing. Cities, huge. Most people, huge continuing migration to the cities. So we need to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We need there to be sustainable consumption and production patterns. This is another green, target. We want, well, here's one, my goodness, taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. For those of us living where I do in Western Canada, this is a huge issue right now. We are, as I look out my window right here where I'm sitting, it's smoky. It's because there are over 500 forest fires on the go. So we are living with the impact of climate change and need to do something about it. 14 is the oceans and seas. 15 is forests, which includes combating desertification and halting and reversing land degradation. And of course, the health of our planet requires a healthy, diverse biodiversity. 16 is peace. You don't have to, to say too much more about that, except that we are living in a time where peace is very difficult for many, many people to experience. And the 17th is an interesting one in revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development. And that's people like ourselves linking up with people like ourselves in all other parts of the world. And that's something that Rajesh and I, in our UNESCO Chair, through the building of capacity in community-based research, we hope to be contributing to this number 17. So that's a quick. Some of you will have memorized these, and I apologize for going over them again. But for some of you, you may not have had an opportunity to hear much more about it. So we've got a number of, if we're going to get there, if we're going to achieve these ambitious but visionary goals, there's a number of capacity deficits. And I'm going to be dealing with number 4, but it's important to note that sustainable support from political leadership, political will is what people talk about, is if we do not have leadership, political leadership in our various countries, and those of us in Canada, of course, we're talking about our federal government, then it will be nearly impossible to reach these goals. We don't have the resources that we need. If you think of anti-poverty, or you think of water, or you think of gender justice and the kinds of resources that we need, this is something that we haven't really tackled in the way that we will be needing to over the next number of years. But we also have a limited and institutional and human capacities. And I say institutional, I work in a university, and my university doesn't talk very much about sustainable development goals. We have quite an ambitious and large-scale research capacity, and almost none of it is framed within a framework of contributions to sustainable development goals. And there are human capacities. We're meant to be working intersectorally, interdisciplinarily, and as we know, that's very difficult to achieve. And then there's the knowledge deficit. I want to talk a little bit more about that, because this is where community-based research has a particular important role to play. Knowledge deficits, so if we talk about the knowledge culture of our universities, we speak largely to ourselves. Our careers depend on internal conversations, either with our own colleagues or with people in our disciplines, in other universities and other parts of the world. And we may very well be engaged in international research, but it's international research between one academic in England and another academic in India and another academic in Canada, and we're not really reaching beyond that quite narrow world of academic knowledge sharing. And of course, all of us know that in particular the academic world, we are hobbled by the particular criteria that are used often in our universities. So careers are linked to publication numbers and certain kinds of publications and research dollars. So all of these are, don't make it any easier for us. But we are, in spite of all of this, we're actually the community-based research movement, of which CBRC is an important part, is growing, has grown quite substantially over the last 10, 15 years. There's also some other aspects of knowledge that we may not think about very much. But if we're thinking globally now, SDGs require global thinking. We really do have a dominance of Western European knowledge. So I think that all of us would realize that what we think about mostly in academic settings as the knowledge base is mostly coming out of the 550-year-old European knowledge system, mostly white knowledge system. We have had a historic loss again, which I don't have time to go into more here, but we have had a global loss of what I call here a global treasury of knowledge systems. And we can think in places like Canada or the Americas, or Africa, or so forth, of the indigenous knowledge systems which have been systematically destroyed and are making a comeback now, but after many years of colonial damage. And the word which a colleague of mine, Boaventura de Sousa Santos, uses is epistemicide. About suicide and homicide and fratricide and all of that. Epistemicide is the killing off of epistemologies, knowledge systems. So that's just another part of the knowledge deficits. What this means in a practical way is there's a lack of visibility and respect for the knowledge of everyday life, in spite of the fact that 90% of the knowledge, actually is created by everybody. As my friend Rajesh says, knowledge is all around us. We are surrounded by knowledge and by knowledge makers, but there's a lack of visibility and respect for the knowledge of those who are living different lives, homelessness, different abilities, women living with violence, refugees, and more. The knowledge which is generated, the experiential, tacit knowledge which is generated by millions and millions of people is largely is very, very seldom visible in our kind of knowledge structures. Here's an interesting map. Now you say, what kind of a map is this? This is a funny looking map. This is a map that talks about inequality in knowledge production. Now we're looking at doing a global comparison. So you can see on the left that big blue, sort of pale blue, and with a dark blue. The dark blue is Canada, where I'm calling from, or where I'm speaking from. The big blue is the United States. And that tiny little green thing down at the bottom, that's Latin America. But the map is drawn according to the proportion of knowledge produced in different parts of the world. So in other words, you can see that the United States produces a lot of knowledge. That England, which is, if you look at the sort of purpley part over there in Europe, that big, that sort of a big kind of a circle there, upper left circle, that's actually England, and it's way out of proportion to, its actual geographic size, because it's also, highly productive. And then you look down and look at Africa. See that little red Africa, which is huge, 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 huge landmass, but the amount of knowledge that's contributed to the global knowledge production is very small. So I just point this out in terms of challenges that we face, in terms of knowledge production. And you could do a similar map. Let's say we tried to do some kind of a map or a pie chart on the percentage of, let's say indigenous scholarship or, Black feminist scholars or, whatever. You can see that there's a real inequality in knowledge production, who's doing it, where they're from, and so forth. So research and the UN SDGs. So the fascinating thing about the SDGs is that they are progressive, they are integrative, they are transformative. The targets are global. I mean, so you've got these huge targets, 169 of these sub-targets. They're global targets, but life is lived locally, and so what is going to work with water in the Canadian context is very different than what is going to work around water harvesting, water preservation, and so forth. In Rajasthan, which is a dry, largely desert area. And the same thing is true in housing situations or cities, and even within one country. I mean, what will work for us in Victoria on issues of homelessness is going to be somewhat different than what will work in a big city like Toronto or Montreal. So so somehow we need a research paradigm. We need an approach to research that is consistent with the goals of transformation and engagement. We need new research and engagement competencies. Within the documents, the official UN documents, there's two kinds of research that are referred to. One is measurement, in other words, impact. They want to know, we need better tools, more sophisticated tools for measuring the impact. And the other is the use of new technologies, digital technologies, to solve the world's problem. What kind of research do we show? But there's the research discourse within the SDG, the official SDG framework is very underdeveloped, and nowhere does it link research and knowledge creation with the goal of creating local, participatory, contextualized, culturally significant knowledge which will contribute to one or another of the SDGs. So we really are in a situation where we need to greatly build a capacity for research that is locally relevant, and of course, which is within the SDGs, internationally significant. So community-based research, some of you will know, are probably very involved and already know a lot about this, but just as a review for those for whom this is a bit newer concept. So this is a Strand, quotation from Strand. Community-based research involves research done by community groups with or without the involvement of a university in relation with the university. CBR is a collaborative enterprise between academics and the community, seeks to democratize knowledge creation by validating multiple sources of knowledge and promoting the use of multiple methods of discovery and dissemination. The goal of CBR is social action for the purpose of achieving social change and social justice, broadly speaking. So the principles that that Rajesh and I, there are various sets of principles. The principles that we make use of are that issues or challenges originate with communities, that it's a participatory process of engagement, that it's a cooperative, it's engaging community members, social movement members, community organizations, and researchers in the process of co-construction of knowledge. It's a co-learning process, so that everybody's learning in this kind of a process. It involves system development and local community capacity building. It is an empowering process through which participants can increase control over their lives. And it involves a balance between research and action. So an action agenda, this is what Rajesh and I think on the from our perspective, is that there's an urgent need to build community-based research capacity in the global south and in what we call the excluded north. So this is what working in communities that are whose knowledge systems are largely invisible or deliberately excluded. We have found through the research that we've done, it's actually fairly tricky to find a place in a university or outside a university where you can learn how to do community-based research. It's often, like one like a 2-week module or on qualitative research or something like that. It's even at my own university, you can go all the way through UVic and never come across the concept. So we've got a lot of work to be doing to build our research capacity. We have created our UNESCO Chair, and you're very welcome to anytime to the website, the UNESCO Chair website. We've created what we call a Knowledge for Change Global Consortium on community-based research, where we are, where we are encouraging the emergence of hubs in different parts of the world, and we are providing a mentor training program for people in those hubs. What we're calling for is universities and civil society organizations to form permanent research and training partnerships. Not just, we're tired, the old idea of, we're going to work together on this project because we've got 5 years of funding is not enough. And in fact, it may in fact, do more damage to civil society structures than it does help. We need permanent, partnerships, MOUs, training structures, where universities and community organizations or social movements are committed to working together, on this agenda, more or less from now on. And we need much more visibility for UN SDGs within our higher education and our disciplinary research communities. For example, I attend these adult education academic conferences, and there's been very little attention, if anything, within the field of adult education as a discipline to the UN SDGs. And within, as I was saying earlier, within my University of Victoria, there's a lot of people in my university never heard of the SDGs, let alone interested in a strategy for contributing directly, So that's it. It's very quick. I've had to I've shortcut lots of ideas. There's a lot of perhaps provocative, I don't know, but it's I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I guess we're going to do that through the chat box. So thank you very much for logging on, being part of this, and let's see what what kinds of conversations we can have through text. And by the way, I'm going to give you my email, just right here, behold. Yes, in case anybody is interested in contacting me directly afterwards, feel free. I'd love to hear from you. So over to you. Thanks, Nkatha. It said I think you're calling in from Kenya. Thanks very much. Could be useful, especially for VNRs. Remind us what VNRs are. Oh, thanks, Nkatha. Great. Yeah, the voluntary national, there will be, or there are already, important reporting mechanisms in each of our countries. We have one in Canada, and they have them in Kenya and all of our countries. So drawing attention, to the SDG secretariats, in our various countries, and on the potential of this is really important. But what's even more important is if we are engaged in community-based research that relates to any of the 17 SDGs, is developing a communication link to our own national SDG bodies, and letting them know what we're doing and why we're doing it and how it contributes, to the SDG. You ask, I don't know whether when I'm saying it is Aggie. I'll just say Aggie. It's hard to in text. It's hard to say whether I'm saying it right or wrong. Do you have examples of more partners that have moved beyond and have sustainable funding? Well, there are a couple of. If you go to the UNESCO Chair website, UNESCO Chair, if you just Google UNESCO Chair in community-based research, I think it comes up the top one. If you go into the website under knowledge products or resources, we've got 2 books of studies that we've done, on community-based research partnerships in many parts of the world, and there's just a lot of material, articles and stories from different parts of the world. There are many examples now of ongoing partnerships. Here at the University of Victoria, we have in 2 areas that come to mind. 3 areas that come to mind. We're doing work on with injection drug use, a harm reduction approach to injection drug use, where injection drug users are researchers together with academics, and that's led by somebody called Bernie Pauley. We have got some work that's been done with sex workers. It's a 25-year partnership between Cecilia Benoit, sociologist at UVic, and one of the peers, an organization of sex workers in the city. We've also got long-term partnerships in areas of Indigenous child welfare, that where our social work school at UVic has been involved in, some 10 or 15 years of ongoing partnerships. So there are a lot of examples, and that's just in my place. I'm sure there are a lot of examples that others know. Let's see what I got. Thank you, Joanne. Yes, Joanne, I see that. Yeah, Glasgow. I've been, Rajesh and I are, very admire and support Glasgow very much. You folks are doing a lot of terrific work in community-based research, and we are we're always trying to follow you and see what you're up to. You're doing a lot of work on cities, which is, of course, very, very important. Lucy asked whether the sorry, Lucy, I didn't respond earlier. You asked on the map what was the knowledge that was represented. I suspect that it was. I'm not sure if it was all peer reviewed, but it would have been more coming out of mainstream kind of publishing publishing houses, the kind of thing that you'd find in Google Scholar. So it doesn't really represent all of the knowledge creation, even all of the academic knowledge creation that's going on. But in terms of the impact, in terms of if you take a look syllabus in a sociology course, in France or in Makerere University, in Uganda, you're going to find, probably 75% of the authors there are going to be the same, and they are going to be people in the field of sociology who are, largely coming from 5, European, and American countries: U.S., England, France, all of those French intellectuals that everybody uses, and so forth. And so there's a homogenization, or a kind of a monopoly, that Western academic knowledge has managed to achieve, that goes on all over the world. So we have a big challenge. Thinking about inequality in knowledge production, or inequality in knowledge acceptance or visibility, is a huge issue, and it's all part of what Rajesh and I talk about as knowledge democracy. I think Nkatha gets the prize for staying up latest. I think she's in Kenya, and I don't know, it must be, what time is it there in Nkatha? Oh, well, that's not so bad. I hope there's nobody here from India. No, I know, Aggie, we have not. We have at a meeting recently, I suggested to the Vice President of Research that we take a look at at our research output in terms of the SDGs, and he thought it was a great idea. And he was talking. He spoke with the president, who also thought it was a great idea. But as far as I know, nobody's followed up on that yet. So what we have done, we have done an impact study of the impact of community-based research at the University of Victoria. And if anybody's interested in that, I think it's, you get in touch with me and I'll pass on that study. There's a very interesting study about about community-based research, the impact of that, that's been carried out. UVic has done a lot, in this field. Joanne, your question about the funding landscape, is it a barrier for engagement activities? Yes, to some degree it is, because as you said, it's the main challenge, if I look at the Canadian kind of funding patterns, is that we've got with a partnership grant we can get up to 7 years. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, considering a number of years ago that we didn't have you couldn't get more than 2 years or 3 years. But SSHRC, the Canadian Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, as well as the South African Research Council, as well as the Irish Research Council, and as well as some of the British, do have an interest now in engaged scholarship. We call it partnership research in the SSHRC vocabulary, but there's more and more interest, more and more funding windows. So in fact, I think in many places it seemed to be an advantage to be working with partners in community partners, societal partners, even local government partners, and so forth, in a way, because everybody's interested, everybody's talking about whether it's the kind of the formal acknowledgement of impact, as in the UK situation, or the more the less formal versions. Everybody wants to know that research is having some kind of societal impact. So I think and I think that's going to grow, and so that I think that's something to think about. Let's see, Kelly, CBR purchasing development. Well, yes. Is it more in social science and health? It certainly is strong in social science and health. One of the interesting phenomena, which, if you take a look at Europe, at the EC, the European Commission funded work over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, you'll see that they've developed a concept called RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation, which is very closely related to community-based research. And you'll find the structural innovation that's come out of Europe around this is the science shop. These structures that are located within universities, but dedicated to partnerships with community groups around a variety of issues identified by the community. And many of those science shops are in the environmental area, and they're, if you take a look at the Living Knowledge Network, it's the network of these science shops. You'll find many examples. Interestingly, in the mentor training program that we're involved in right now, that Nkatha Mercy from Kenya is part of, one of our mentors is a neurologist. He's an internationally known researcher on brain function, and he's very interested in the link between that kind of work and community. So I'm not sure where he's going to go with that interest, but there's a lot of interest. And climate change, of course, climate change is something that really engagement is very, very useful for. So I would say if you look at indigenous knowledge around climate issues, there's quite a lot of work being done on evaluating more traditional approaches to the environment in that way. So yes, I think it's coming, but the capital S sciences, they have a different discourse. They don't talk so much about community based, but they do it. Oh, thanks, Aggie. The VIU that'd be great to see what they're doing. If you have any more information on that, please share it with me, because those examples of different universities, what they're doing could be contagious. There's the UNESCO Chair website, in case anybody's interested. Thank you, Chris. That's a great link. Thank you so much for that. I will. I'll check that out for sure. So thanks everybody. Thanks Jessica and the CBRC for allowing me this time. Ata Mercy, thank you in Kiswahili. That's lovely. Keep up your interest, and you're all part of a movement. So let's keep on communicating together. All right, bye bye everybody.